Hi guys, welcome back to another video, or your first video here, I don't know. Welcome if you're new here, welcome either way. So this is going to be my December wrap up for 2023. I'm slowly making my way through the end of the year videos that I've got very behind on, and like with all my wrap ups, I start with my DNFs and then I go through the books from my least to my most favourite. I know that's not a phrase. Starting with my DNFs then, I've got one that I actually have a copy of, and that is The Last Girl Standing, The Beginning. So this is a slasher novel, and I think that is kind of the main reason why I'm going to be giving up on this. So slashers aren't really my thing. It's also written intentionally to be really cheesy and 80s, and I think that the main characters felt very vapid, which I didn't enjoy, but I think was done quite intentionally on the part of the author to match the style of that. This is a short novella that goes before the first book in the series, and yeah, the reason why I picked this up in the first place was because I was told that there was a gay main character or LGBT main character, but yeah, this one didn't work for me. Next, we have one that I hardly remember I even tried, and that is Lesbian Zombies from Outer Space. I'm pretty sure this one just appeared on my script. I decided to try it out, and it didn't work for me. Don't really have much else to say. And my final DNF is Man's Best Boyfriend. So this was a gay comic that I found on one of my apps. The relationship was quite weird in here, so it follows a astronaut who is sent into space with no human interaction apart from his dog companion, and after being brought back to Earth, he has clearly gone through a lot of psychological trauma because he sees every human as a dog and every dog as a human, and it's just very... It just put a bad taste in my mouth because you can tell what character his relationship is going to be with, and he is seeing that person as a dog. So I was just like, no, that makes me quite uncomfortable. Now on to my 1 stars. I had another reread of the Belinda Blink series, which I've gone through multiple times now on this channel, where this is the erotic series that is being read by the My Dad Wrote a Porno podcast. The podcast is a lot of fun, but the books that they're reading aren't very good, hence why they're getting 1 star. It follows a character called Belinda as she attempts to sleep her way to the top of the pots and pans industry. Next, I have a couple of 3 stars. The first 3 are very, very similar. They are gay comics that I read on one of my free apps, and all of them were just fine and probably very sex heavy. I don't see myself rereading them. They were just a good time start to finish. So the first one being Can't Think Straight, about a homophobic guy. He starts being attracted to his male roommate and just can't cope. Keep a Dog, which I liked the fact that it got slightly darker, and Hit Me, which I think is the most sex heavy of all of those. The final 3 star being a fantasy art book. So this went through the artwork of the author. I thought it was a fine read, but again, I'm never going to go back to this. And something that I'm quite excited about is the fact that most of my reads were 4 and 5 stars in this month. So first of all, we have God Loves Hair, which is a book by Vivek Shraya. So she is a trans woman, and I've read a couple of books by her now, and I really love the experience of reading her stuff. A lot of it almost tells more than one story at once, or is not even quite heavy with metaphor, but it goes through a story of the main character, but also brings in a lot of myth and folklore around religious stories and the messages in which they relate to the main character's struggle. In here, there's a lot of conversations about hair and identity and how hair is often like evokes so many different opinions based on where it is on your body, how you wear it, how long it is, whether or not you cover it up, and it was just such a good book. Next we have Kira and Me by, I think his name is Anthony Fitzpatrick, who you may know as the super vet. So he wrote a story about his really special relationship with one of his dogs, Kira, and it was illustrated much in the style of The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, and it was just beautiful. I bought it actually for my sister, but I decided to read it before giving it to her, just in case it wouldn't be something that she liked. But this was just wonderful, and I think that I could really see this working both for fans of things like The Boy, the Mole, the Fox and the Horse, and for fans of the Super Vet as well. The next one is a collection of poems, which I believe I have here, and that is Precarious by Peter Reynard. This I picked up because Waterstones were having a sale on and a bunch of poetry collections were £1 each, and I, in the store, decided to read the first couple of poems of each of a bunch of collections to see if I wanted to continue. This one I really enjoyed. He tends to write slightly longer poems that feel more stream of consciousness, or a bit more like prose, kind of that in-between stage of really short, snappy poetry and prose. Like, you can see there's quite a bit of text. And as a poetry collection, it doesn't really have a narrative that I can really go off, but I really enjoy the themes in here. He talks a lot about class and mental health, and how to explain it, it's sort of like the move to look after one's mental health maybe isn't accessible to people of certain classes, which I thought was really interesting. And so if you are a poetry lover, I highly recommend picking this up. Next we have Maudie and the Magnificent Sky. This is a children's book that I picked up at a local fair, and I was going to give it as am going to give it as a Christmas present to one of my nephews, but I wanted to read it first to make sure that it was going to be suitable for his age. It was made by a photographer where, by using puppets and photography, she had made each of the images in the story, and it follows a young girl who the sun goes away, and so the clouds take her on a journey to find the sun. Next we have a book called What's Your Pronoun, which was a non-fiction book going over the idea of pronouns and a bunch of different types of pronoun that we've gone through as a society to have a singular version of they. And this taught me a lot about pronouns in the English language that I personally hadn't known before. I found it really interesting, and I really want my own copy of this. The next two are books that I also own but just haven't gotten rid of yet. So let me go get them. So yes, I really enjoyed these, but I don't see myself returning to them, and that is The Guinea Pig Nutcracker and The Guinea Pig Oliver Twist. So these are also photography based stories where they are retellings of these two stories where guinea pigs from, I think, shelters were put into little costumes and photographed in different scenes in order to tell these stories. And these are lovely, but I think I'm going to be passing them on. Next we have a comic, and that is XXX Holic or XXX Holic. I'm not sure how it's supposed to be pronounced, but during this month I read volumes 3, which is this one, to volume 8. So this follows a boy who can see demons, and he is plagued by these visions, and he comes across a shop that sort of grants wishes, and the owner of this shop is very enigmatic. He doesn't understand her. Sometimes the shop doesn't seem to exist, or it seems to exist for when people need it, and he gets employed by the shop owner and he goes on all these adventures. I really love this comic. I really love the art style. It's by Clamp, who are a collection of, I think, 4 different manga artists who work together. This also has crossovers with some of their other work. And I believe this one was a reread, because I'd read the first few volumes and then set it aside, and I decided I wanted to complete out the series, so I reread this in order to continue, and I got to volume 8, which I found really enjoyable. That's it for 4 stars, and I have one 4.5, and that is Heartland. Now, I went into this really knowing nothing. I literally just picked it up because it was labelled as queer on my audiobook app, and I really loved it. It was so weird. It follows a woman who is in a relationship and she gets dumped by this person for someone else, and so she becomes obsessed with that other woman, and she has such unsavory views and really strange leaps in logic, and she was so unpleasant as a person, but she was so interesting to follow and just to be in the mind of this character. I'm not going to go too much more into the plot because I think that would go into spoiler territory, but I do think that this could possibly reach a 5 if I reread it. It was just such a strange experience to read, and I really loved it. And in the month of December, I also had quite a number of 5 stars, which I'm really happy about. The first being Cloaked in Shadow. I picked this up because I really enjoyed one of this author's other series called the Dartmoor universe, and I decided to pick up something else by him. This one follows a world where a bunch of characters are going to be trained in their magical abilities, but the main character doesn't quite understand what it is he can do, or his abilities don't quite match what is the standard. So a lot of his trainers and teachers are under the impression that he's basically being stubborn and doesn't want to show his abilities, but he ends up being very close to the prince, and they end up forming a relationship and uncovering some secrets that are going on. And I really love this, and I want to continue on in the series. I really just love, I think it's Ben Alderman, I really love the way that he forms gay relationships. I really love the fantasy world that he creates. Next we have Salt Magic Skin Magic. I picked this up on an Audible sale, I believe, and again I picked this up because it was labelled as gay, and honestly from the cover I didn't think this was going to be very good, but I really loved this. I think that it tackled so many themes like obsession and parental abuse or neglect and feeling trapped in your situation. The magic system was really interesting. It follows, I don't know whether or not going through what fantasy characters this was following would spoil the twist, but I think it was really interestingly done and not something that I've really seen before. But if you like gay fantasy, I would highly recommend that. Oh, next we have 2 that I do have copies of. Yep, they are here. Again, these are 2 books that I picked up at a local artist fair around December. It would have been a Christmas fair, I believe. So that is the first one being Things with Wings. So this is a book by Esther Conan, and a lot of her art is sort of biological puns. So for example, the entry for the tiger moth, the art would be of an animal which was a cross between a tiger and a moth. These, I believe, are elephant flies, if you can see from the cover. So it sort of goes through a bunch of animals described as if they were, the names were taken literally. And so this was lovely. The second being Moon in My Room, which is a little story with illustrations. It feels much more like a poem, and I could definitely see this working for kids. But yes, both of these were beautifully done. Next we have Lord of the Mint. Now, I don't even know whether or not to count this as a book, but it was on Audible, and this is a recording of one of Julian Clary's comedy performances. I love Julian Clary. I think that he's hilarious, and I always go to the pantomime at the Palladium every year in order to see him in particular, and I just think he's fabulous, and I'm so excited for his comedy tour that he is going to be doing this year. I'm so excited. And we're going to end on two comics that I just loved so much. One of them is a reread, and that is The Words in Your Snare. This one I picked up because it was all over my Instagram, and it's one of these Infinity Scroll comics that I got on a comic app, and it follows a guy who can see what people are thinking as visual words, and he is used by the police force in order to solve crimes, and he gets wrapped up in a sort of mafia style relationship, and the most recent crime that he is called in to investigate actually involves the man who he has recently got into a relationship with, and so he has to navigate that. I think that it was just the right amount of dark. It was really twisty turny. I thought that it went into a lot of themes, parental neglect and abuse, the concept of knowing what someone else is thinking, how having those abilities could really drive you mad, and sibling dynamics. And there were a couple of themes where I was really apprehensive as to how they were going to be addressed, but they were addressed in such an interesting and respectful way that I was just so impressed with it, and I really recommend. And the other one was a series that I hadn't heard anything about, and that was Murderous Llewellyn's Candlelit Dinner, volumes 1 to 5. This one follows a very down on his luck writer, and he one day finds a man peeling onions endlessly outside his door, and that sort of sets off them finding a lot more about each other, and just the way that the places that this story went, I just really couldn't have predicted. If this isn't talked about in the synopsis, then I'll cut this bit out, but he finds out that the man who is chopping all these onions might actually be a local murderer, and it was just such a fascinating read, and I loved it. Again, loads of themes, and went to a really dark place while also being very compelling and interesting, and not just gratuitous for the sake of it. And I know I'm not doing a good job of explaining this, but I just loved it. And there you have it. Those are all the books that I read in December, and that wraps up my reading year. I really do think I had a really good reading year. I can't wait to do my year in review video. And what do I want to know? Please let me know a book that you loved from last year. Yeah, that's it. And I will see you in my next video. Bye.